Hey guys, last video, I have blue on my chin because I had a reminder to myself to make this video and I went like this, and so now I have blue on my chin for the video. Wonderful. So chapter 21, I'm going a little bit out of order, but I'm going to start with Gardnerella and group B Streptococcus. So both of these are gram-positive bacteria that can be found in the vagina. This chapter is all about the genitourinary system. And they're kind of normal, but kind of not. So they're found in a lot of women. I think like 50% test positive for Gardnerella and maybe 20% test positive for group B strep. There is a correlation with like an increased risk of pelvic inflammatory disease or something like that. Gardnerella can cause foul odor. So bacterial vaginosis is what we call when people have excess Gardnerella. It's an odor issue more so than a health issue. So a lot of times people will have that treated. We call that bacterial vaginosis or BV. Group B strep is Strep agalactiae. What we talked about in pregnant women, if they test positive for group B strep, they're usually put on antibiotics during labor because group B strep can cause meningitis of the newborn. So it poses a danger really just to newborns coming out of that vagina, not to otherwise healthy women. Next one I'm going to talk about is Leptospira. Leptospira is not a very common disease-causing agent. It's really circumstantial. So the reason it's in this chapter, it doesn't actually cause disease of the genitourinary system, but it comes from animal urine, and it can actually go through your skin. So it becomes most problematic when there's flooding because floodwaters tend to be contaminated with animal urine, and Leptospira is a spirochete, and it swims around in that floodwater, and if you wade around in that floodwater, then it can actually infect through your skin, through openings, so through wounds. But they don't have to be large wounds. So it becomes problematic after like natural disasters in particular. But also people who live around animals and have, get cow urine on a cut on their hand could get Leptospira. So it causes the initial stage of the disease, like fever, chills, aches, nausea, sort of kind of generic symptoms. So sometimes it can be hard to diagnose unless somebody was wading around in floodwaters. But it can progress to more systemic disease where it can cause failure of the liver and kidneys, so it can lead to jaundice. And I guess another reason why it's in this urogenital chapter is because it can cause kidney failure. Kidneys are important for generating urine. Leptospira. Next few I'm going to talk about are a mixture of gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria. Staphylococcus saprophyticus, Enterococcus, and E. coli are three normal flora, that are found in the gastrointestinal system, that are found in a healthy human gut. But if they get into the urethra, they can cause urinary tract infections, also known as UTIs. UTIs, by the way, are more common in females than in males because of female anatomy. The female anus, the anal opening, which is teeming with all of these guys, is a lot closer to the urethra, a couple inches away, than it is in a male whose urethra is also much longer, so bacteria climbing all the way up a several-inch urethra is a little bit harder than in a female, which has a very short urethra. So females are more prone to these urinary tract infections. All of those are just normal bacteria. It's the reason why, as I told my husband, when my daughter was born, you wipe front to back. Do not wipe back to front for a female. Just keep poop out of the pee hole, right? Neisseria Gonorrhea. Now we're getting into the sexually transmitted diseases of the chapter. Neisseria Gonorrhea causes gonorrhea, is the name of the disease, though it has historically gone by several nicknames like the clap. And it literally the word gonorrhea means flow or discharge of seed. One of the symptoms of gonorrhea is white discharge. It says on here a genital discharge disease. So gonorrhea is a genital discharge disease. It's oftentimes asymptomatic though, so it can go unnoticed. And with a lot of the STDs or STIs that we're going to talk about, a lot of them are asymptomatic until they're not, until they cause deeper infection and more serious problems. So the issue with all of these STDs, really, gonorrhea, chlamydia, is that they can progress to deeper infections of the reproductive tissues and cause more serious permanent damage if they're not diagnosed and treated early on. And it's hard to diagnose and treat them if you don't know you have them. Chlamydia is the other one that can be asymptomatic a lot of times. It's actually the most common sexually transmitted infection in the U.S., so keep an eye out for that one. Chlamydia is an interesting organism. It's gram-negative, but it's actually an obligate intracellular bacteria. So you can't culture it, and it has to be inside cells to grow. So you also can't catch it from like surfaces. You only get it from direct contact because it can only live inside cells. So it can't like live on a surface like other bacteria can. Treponema pallidum is the causative agent of syphilis. Your table here says genital ulcer disease. That's because one of the first stages of syphilis is the formation of this painless ulcer at the site of intercourse, so on the vagina or penis. A lot of people ignore that ulcer because it's painless and it goes away. And so they're like, oh, whatever it was, I'm fine now. And they may not seek medical treatment. And then the treponema, which is a spirochete. And the other thing with a spirochete is Lyme disease. So spirochetes have this ability to cause sort of a telltale initial sign that may or may not worry you. Like with Lyme disease, it's the bullseye rash. And with treponema, it's that painless ulcer, and but then it spreads deeper, and it will become like a late stage disease that causes multiple problems and is untreatable at that point. So it's really only treatable in the early stages. So if you ever experience a painless sore on your genitals, get it checked out. Syphilis, not very common anymore in the U.S. It used to be they didn't understand what it was caused by. So the late stage of disease it can cause a lot of things, but one of the things it causes is basically dementia. But it is treatable with antibiotics. It used to not be, or before we knew that it was treatable with antibiotics, it was really rampant, and also before prophylaxis use. So like in the early 1900s, it was really rampant, killed a lot of people. Not so much anymore because it's diagnosable and treatable. Syphilis. Another sexually transmitted infection, STI, is herpes simplex virus. Remember, herpes viruses have that wonderful ability to never go away. They are permanently infecting your nerves, so they can go dormant in your nerves and then they can reactivate. And herpes simplex causes, as it says on this list, genital ulcer disease. It does cause ulcers to form on the genitalia. It can also cause cold sores on the lips. So both HSV1 and HSV2 cause cold sores and genital herpes. One causes more often than the other. And they are herpes, so they can keep coming back on and off. HPV, human papillomavirus, is a very, very, very common virus. Like 90-something% of people will contract it at some point in their lives. There are multiple strains of HPV. Technically, we should have talked about it in the chapter about skin because it causes skin warts, but it can also cause genital warts, and that's what it's listed in here for. Wart disease causes genital warts. So it's different strains that cause the genital warts than those that cause your regular vanilla skin warts or foot warts. So each number strain of HPV, there's like HPV 1, 2, 3, up to like 60-something. And they each favor a different sort of type of skin or epithelial tissue. So some infect mucosal genitalia, some infect the thicker skin of your hands and feet. But another problem with HPV, the bigger problem with it, is some of the strains that infect the genitalia also have the ability to integrate themselves into your DNA. And when they do that, they have a very high tendency to interrupt important genes of the cell cycle, resulting in cancer. So HPV is the number one and really only cause of cervical cancer. It's a virus that is oncogenic. It's an oncogenic virus. And there is a vaccine for HPV now. I think it is for 6 strains of HPV, the 3 most common ones that cause cervical cancer and the 3 most common ones that cause genital warts. Came out in 2006, maybe? I think 2006. And they already are showing some preliminary results that cancer rates in Australia, I read an article recently, that cancer rates in Australia, cervical cancer rates in Australia are way, way down in the last 10 years. So the vaccine seems to be working in terms of reducing cancer rates. It's really an interesting vaccine because the point of it is actually not really to prevent disease like from the virus. The virus doesn't cause any like systemic disease or discomfort. It's cancer. It's really a cancer vaccine. It prevents cervical cancer. That is the purpose of it. And to some extent, genital warts as well. More information than you wanted. This lovely blue on my chin. Okay. Getting to the end here. Candida albicans is a fancy word for yeast. The yeast, it's a fungus that lives very happily and normally in vaginas and mouths and even skin. And it's not really an infection that it causes, it's a super infection, right? So it's an overgrowth of yeast. That's what a yeast infection is. So here it says vaginitis or vaginosis. So it's just an overgrowth in the vagina, can cause itching and excess discharge and can be uncomfortable. So you can treat it with antifungals. And it's very common after taking antibiotics, which wipe out normal flora of the vagina, which lead to overgrowth of candida. The medical term actually is really candidiasis, and which really just means a condition of candida or yeast, because it's not really an infection. It's a super infection, an overgrowth. And then lastly, we've got Trichomonas vaginalis, which is a protozoal STD. Sometimes the disease it causes is called trichomoniasis. That's really the proper name for the disease, even though it's listed here as causing vaginitis. Vaginitis just means inflammation of the vagina. So a lot of STDs cause vaginitis. The end.